Hello, Michael.
Hello, Regine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome to the Transfer of Emission, of Awakening, excuse me, channel. And I saw you in Bad Gaps, Buddha at the Gas Pumps interview with Rick Archer.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, I'd like to interview him. You had this like silence about you and stillness about you, and I was really intrigued by that. So I
Yeah.
wanted to know more. So welcome to our channel. And so can you please like tell us like how you got started on this path and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I well, I was always interested in Eastern spirituality since childhood, really, and this was a kind of inwardness that was always with me. So as soon as I learned about martial arts and so forth, that the symbolism of Eastern wisdom came through to me in that, and I began practicing martial arts at a young age, maybe 10 years old, and I practiced for about 7 years very intensively. Um, I had a wonderful Korean master. He was a master of three different martial arts. Um, so I was already kind of steeped in this inwardness and this idea that I had to something to bring out from the mind and body, something to integrate the mind and body to discover um, how my being works through that. Somehow there was a pull toward that. And then when adolescence came, I basically kind of left all that behind for a while. I got into developing the intellect, which is part of that phase of life, right? And so I got into thinking and thinking about the world and so forth, and thinking about politics and history, and um, yeah, and there was social development as well. And then by the time I was 20 years old, I was really starting to finish up with all that external focus. I I just was being drawn back inward to remember my own temperament, my own nature, and something that was always pulling me. So but by then I had an identity to kind of take down. I'd really identified with the mind, being an intelligent person or someone who is going to help the world through the intellect mainly, and that was how I saw my role in life. So I started to just take that take that identity down from within. And I basically re-encountered Eastern wisdom through my habit of reading different novel. I was reading novels, poetry, things like that, and then eventually I found some Buddhist writings and Zen poetry and things like that. And that was it. I was sort of back home again,
Hmm.
and I pursued that until I came to my interest in psychology, where I realized I had a role to play with helping people to understand themselves. I had abilities there that I never knew of in college, or I just took some new courses and started reading in those areas. And um, when I found out about the different authors such as Carl Jung or various Buddhist psychologists who were integrating psychology and spirituality, that was it. I knew this is what I have to do. This is my gateway and how I'm going to find my place in life. So from psychology, I went, I, I not only had an interest in spirituality and in bridging some of those ideas, I sort of plunged in and became, possessed by that. Just completely, completely interested in the spiritual quest for freedom.
Hmm. So, did you say you always had that quest? Did you say you always had that yearning?
I always had an inward reflective nature that I was watching myself. I was observing my mind. As a child, I had a sense that my life was divine. That there was something inside that I had to bring out. I always had that feeling. Yeah, I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, well, I've noticed some of your writings on your website. Absolutely beautiful. Reminds me of who's that writer? Is it from New England? I'm blanking out. But yeah, very deep, but just beautiful. Did you write something for was it called the One magazine
Oh
or
yeah,
something?
yeah. I wrote a little
Yeah.
autobiographical piece for Shanti at One magazine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So your writing, it just seems like is that part of your spiritual path too?
It's an expression of it. Yeah, yeah. It's something that is. Uh, well, I love to write, and well, I was writing a lot of poetry. That's kind of how I started with writing. So that was poetry was a place where I was finding some of the first spiritual teachings actually in my life when I in my 20s. So taking in wisdom and inspiration through the written word definitely has been profound for me. For other people, that it doesn't come that way. It's not really felt in that way. But for me, certain words, especially if they come from someone who's steeped in that consciousness, they really can inspire me. Yeah.
So were you influenced by people like Emerson? That's who I was thinking
I
of.
was
Or
wondering, yeah, I was wondering if
yeah,
you're thinking Emerson, Thoreau.
yeah. And Thoreau, yes.
Yeah, yeah, I was reading things like that, various
Mhm,
poets and writers like that.
mhm,
And I was thinking, well, what is it about, and what can I do with this? How do I? This is my interest. Whatever they're talking about is what
mhm,
I love.
mhm,
So I called it being. And I thought, well,
mhm.
what do I do with that? Do I become an English professor? you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, have you practiced psychology?
Yeah, in fact, I am a practicing psychologist. Yeah, a clinical psychologist.
Hmm.
I just got my license from the state of California, in fact.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Are you in the Bay Area as well?
I am.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So we're
Yeah.
neighbors.
We're neighbors. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay, congratulations. So you'll be seeing a lot of mental patients.
I think so. Yeah. I had many years of internships, and yeah, and then I had about a year and a half off
Hmm.
just to do my spiritual work and writing.
Hmm.
Yeah. And getting ready to get the license, taking the test for licensure.
Hmm. So I'm just curious how spirituality and psychology, how it meets, and how you as a practicing psychologist, how you bring that into your work, as opposed to just like a regular conventional psychologist.
Yeah, it's what really matters to me is consciousness. That's the operative, transformative factor in a psychology that is whole and complete and deep. Depth psychology we call it. So what gives the depth to it is consciousness and the understanding of the transcendent nature of consciousness and the immanent nature of consciousness, that everything we're experiencing and seeing is consciousness. That's a very abstract idea for many people, including
Right.
psychologists. But
Hmm.
that's what's bringing a whole different dimension to the work with people and the understanding. So with some clients, I speak about that, and with some, I don't speak about it at all.
I see. So you
But
kind of you just relate to them where from where they are.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
hmm
Hmm.
So psychology, many psychologies don't recognize liberation. They don't recognize the possibility of it.
Really? Oh.
Oh no, not at all.
Huh. I thought that was the whole goal of psychology. Was to free
Well,
us from like our, like they always touch on like the inner child and
hmm
things like that in our neurosis and stuff. I thought it was all about freeing that stuff so that we could be happier and healthier in our lives.
yeah, it's true that psychology emphasizes becoming more free, more happy, and that's a great, service that this rather new field has given to us in the West. That we even have this modality of seeking some therapy when we need help getting a little less stuck. Um, but it yes, psychology acknowledges the possibility of becoming more happy and conscious and generally free, but it doesn't usually acknowledge liberation as such by the traditional definition of the word or enlightenment. There's no, well, it's rather esoteric from the view of psychology.
Hmm.
So the awakening as consciousness and recognizing the oneness of all things is something totally different.
Mhm.
It's deeper. It's not that it's disconnected from the general goals of psychology. It's all kind of pointing in that direction. But does psychology point all the way? No, usually not.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's great that then you're offering something different, you know, to
Yeah.
this field.
Yeah, I think it's a
Mhm.
wonderful well, I think it's what we're here for is to really acknowledge that a human being has the capacity to wake up, and anything less than that is not really satisfying,
Mhm.
so people really, when they can hear that message, they rejoice. They really, it's something we all want to hear.
Mhm.
And
So is that what Jung was is that one part of his work?
yeah, he was just about there with
Yeah.
the liberation. It was,
Mhm.
well, very complex psychology that he created and discovered. It was very intellectual, but he was really pointing toward a similar process. Yeah.
Mhm.
It
Okay.
wasn't, I don't think it was crystal clear though.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
But he was getting there.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Have you studied the works of the is it Goethe?
Yeah,
Goethe?
yeah, Goethe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what do you think of him?
I have not studied them. But yeah, I think he was quite an illumined man as well.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
from what I've seen.
Mhm. Yeah, Rudolf Steiner was a big fan of Goethe. Have you heard of Rudolf Steiner?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, the Steiner schools and yeah, my first teacher in natural healing. Yeah, he always talked about Rudolf Steiner and his work and so you kind of remind me of that. It's like whatever has to do with like nature, you know, like
Yeah.
finding the spirit or the soul like in nature. You have that kind of aura about you.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I that is part of the expression for me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So speaking of awakening and enlightenment, what do you think of enlightenment? Do you consider yourself enlightened?
Uh it's there's not a self that is enlightened or not enlightened.
Mm.
That's what I would say. So it's not that I consider myself, I don't consider myself anything because it implies that the self is an object,
I see.
that it's got, here's myself and it's this object that I know, and it's got this status of being enlightened or not enlightened. And so the enlightenment that we refer to is realizing that there's no self as a fixed object.
Hmm.
Now, is that clear to me? That's absolutely clear to me. So I don't say I'm enlightened. I say, yes, I'm the light of consciousness, as you are, as everything is. That's absolutely clear. And it's very simple, you know? It's not a special status. It's just something that is realized at a certain point. Um, and it can be realized at different levels of clarity. So that clarity for me is still deepening. But that's the fundamental shift is from viewing ourself as a kind of object, a known identity, um, versus not.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I've spoken to other like teachers and spiritual healers who say that they have experience of just like kind of like witnessing their body. Like they could see themselves picking up this pen or eating or driving a car, but
Mhm.
there's no kind of identification with it. It's more of a witnessing. So is it like that for you too?
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's an aspect of clarity when we see that the body and mind, when they wake up in the morning, they have a script to follow. They have a dharma, and they will act, right? So it's, well, what's next, and even the thinking what's next, that's just coming to you. Okay, what do I do first, and the day begins. And yeah, you just watch all that happen the from the deepest and broadest possible view, which is the view of the witness. I'm not talking about a separate witness. Some people associate witness with like the witnessing mind or the ego. But the deepest true witness is consciousness. And from consciousness, yes, I just watch the mind and body kind of, yeah, live their life. But the watching doesn't mean the watcher is separate. It's absolutely one with that happening. It's totally intimate. As I watch this human life of Michael take shape and evolve.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's transcendent and immanent, as I was saying before. It's consciousness is completely transcendent as the witness of everything. Yet it's completely immanent as that experience. Absolutely. But the change with liberation is that there's a clarity straight through every experience. That you're it's sort of like you're before awakening, there's a sense that the experience is coming first and the witness might catch up later, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
everything's sort of coming at you and overwhelming you, and you might stumble and catch yourself and say, "Oh my, what was I thinking about that? Why am I so anxious now?"
Mm.
But
Okay.
with the recognition of our true nature, it's like consciousness is first. It's so in the foreground and background. It's noticing. It's like it's never shaken off its place because it can't be. You're just noticing every single thought that's coming through your head, every feeling, everything completely uh, in in the now with immediacy, without any haze. There's not that haze of separation and kind of confusion about, well, what's happening? Why am I suffering? It's like this haze has been uh, shined through
Hmm.
and dissolved.
So you don't have the story anymore. You don't make up a story about things or.
No, not that kind of story, but the story of the divine story is there, the divine story that we're all creating.
Mm-hmm.
of life. It's its own story happening without a separate self making up a story that is usually becoming a nightmare, of suffering.
Yeah, so speaking of suffering, what do you think is the cause of suffering in human beings?
It's the haze. It's that haze that I mentioned. It's of separation. It's of a sense of a strong divide between inner and outer, between self and other, and it's that separation also involves a confusion about what we're experiencing. How is the mind working? How is the mind relating to the other or to my sense of purpose in life? And the unawakened mind, if we can call it that, is it's very clouded. See, and people don't when we don't have the light of consciousness shining clearly through that mind, we don't have a clear understanding of values, of the fundamental values or guiding lights of our spiritual being. We're very confused about what's true in every any kind of situation. So we're never quite seeing what's really happening and why it's happening that way. And so what we call a pure mind or a clear mind, and well, the clearest mind is that which has really awakened to its source. There's a lot of wisdom about how things happen and what's happening. And that's love. That clarity is actually an aspect of love because love needs space. Love needs that transparency between me and the other. Transparency regarding the event that's happening, the challenge that's coming to me, allows me to respond in a creative, loving way rather than in a dissociated way.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're seeing on the stage of human suffering is just mass dissociation. We don't know what we're doing in our relationships. The politicians don't know what they're doing with their policies. They think they know. They think they know everything. But we don't really know what we're doing. So the cure, yeah, that's the nature of the suffering. And the cure is this clarity and wisdom that is also love in action. That's clear as day to me. There's no question about that. And people pretend that, oh, no one knows, no one knows the answer. It's we're working on it. Yeah, the answer the answer is it's so obvious. We just need to come out of this dissociation.
Mm-hmm.
And as we come out of it, we start to see, yeah, well, this is how I'm creating my misery because if I'm not getting down on the ground and in touch with that, just like when a child is hurting, you get down on their level and you meet them and you speak to them in their way and you get really intimate with what's happening for them and where they got hurt or whatever. If we're not doing that in our own mind, then we're always pushing it away and hoping it's just gonna, like the crying child. You mentioned the inner child. It's
Mm-hmm.
like we're hoping the inner child of ourselves or the world, so to speak, is just gonna shut up someday. And it's not.
Yeah.
Not until we really get intimate and conscious about what's happening.
Hmm. Conscious. Yeah. So what would you say is consciousness?
That's an important question. Um, I define it as just that which is witnessing every experience allowing there to be the knowing of any experience. So consciousness is not an object at all. We cannot locate any object as consciousness. We can't place it either. We can't say it's in my forehead or it's in my belly or it's just over here or there. Consciousness is just this intelligent quality, this self-luminous quality of mirror-like, yeah, awareness. Well, without consciousness, there's no universe, there's no awareness of thinking, there's no experience to be had whatsoever.
Mhm.
So that definition I'm giving to consciousness is different from what some others will say, because they'll say, go beyond consciousness to awareness, to pure
Mm,
awareness,
I
or
see.
something like that.
Mhm.
So in that case, they're defining the consciousness as like ego consciousness, subject object consciousness, where I think I'm a separate subjective consciousness from the object. And so they said go beyond that into pure awareness. I define pure awareness and consciousness as the same. I'm speaking about pure consciousness in its pure essential definition.
Mhm.
Same thing.
Mhm. So would you consider yourself a purist?
Well, yeah, yes, I'm a purist because we have to get down to what's pure or
Mhm.
essential.
Mhm.
And if we say, well, oh, there's no such thing, then okay, well, but that's not my experience.
Mhm.
To me, that's not wisdom. That's not the truth.
Mhm.
That's just the mind saying that there's no such thing as pure awareness or whatever.
Mhm. Now, when I was watching your interview with Rick Archer, Buddha at the Gas Pump, the issue of values and ethics came into question as it relates to enlightenment. Like, there are certain people who are very aware or evolved in certain areas. But in other areas, it's like, okay, maybe there's some growing to do still. So I'd like you to touch upon that because I think that might be really important for people to understand. Because sometimes people think, oh, once you're enlightened, that's it. There are no more you know, or awakened or aware, however you want to word it.
Yeah,
Once someone
yeah.
has reached a certain spiritual development, there's no more growing, that they're always right, you know, and they don't make any mistakes. So why did you say that having a basis of values and moral ethics is really kind of like a precursor to all of
Mm-hmm.
that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, there are kind of two questions in there, but I'll try to yeah deal with one of them first.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a saying in Zen that today's enlightenment is tomorrow's mistake. So the idea that there are no mistakes after enlightenment is crazy. Um, the initial shift of enlightenment is just the beginning. What we might call the overall process of enlightenment, of reaching that deepest maturity, is yeah, that's ongoing, endless, as far as I can tell. But so after the initial shift, um, and it's both sudden and there are sudden and gradual aspects of this. So the realization has to it will then go to work within us to clarify and see through more aspects. Um, that's absolutely my experience, and it shows you once the light comes on how much darkness there is, so to speak. Except the darkness is no longer so black. It's no longer so dense. It's just oh yeah, there's some shadow there. There's something. There's a disturbance there, a sense of separation in this emotional aspect. It's like an echo of ignorance. The ignorance being the fundamental sense of separateness, there are echoes of that. We say it's in the mind body. It's all the mind. The body is the mind. So it's held there in our emotional reactions and in our psychology in different ways. And it takes time for consciousness to uh, lighten that load. Some people call that process embodiment. Um, have you heard of that word? I imagine you have. I don't like that as much because it kind of implies that on the one hand you've got your enlightenment, which maybe happened in some moment, and then that's it as far as the realization goes, and then the rest is just this embodying, like as though it's coming into the body, or that I have to choose to be embodied, or figure out like how do I embody this now, this wisdom. But that's not really, you wouldn't be trying to figure it out in that way. What's happening, the way I prefer to describe it, is the realization is ongoing. It's yes, you've opened the biggest door there with the initial recognition of non-duality of consciousness. But now that realization is going to move onward. It's never ending. It's timeless, but it's never ending. So what we call embodiment, as I see it, is really means just an ever deepening realization of clarity. Um, the other question, was there another question in there about ethics and
The
so forth?
values, yes, values and ethics as it relates to waking up or, consciousness.
Can you put that? What is your exact question about that?
My question is that how important is it to have a basis of values and moral ethics? Um, because like I said,
Okay.
because sometimes people think, okay, well, because I'm on the spiritual path and because I meditate or whatever I may do, um, maybe I am above natural law or any laws, you know? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, well, first of all, we talk about ethics in spirituality as though they're separate from wisdom.
mm,
And I've talked in that way too, like as if, well, it's nice to have some ethics before awakening or something like that, because it kind of orients the mind. But really, the ethical principles or values are not separate from wisdom. So it's like you can't say, well, you should have these in place. Either you're having them in place or you're not. You're what's the value of the ethical principles that we hear about is that someone who has realized wisdom has sort of given voice to these values, and they work to orient the mind. If you don't already have them, if they're not obvious to you, then you hear these values like selfless service, make a
mm,
contribution, honesty, integrity, and so forth. Um, yeah, right alignment. There are all kinds of ways of expressing these. They're If they're not obvious to you, but then you hear them, it's giving an aspect of the wisdom of consciousness, introducing that to your mind, and then you say, "Oh yeah, oh that would simplify things." If I take that on and see if that's true in my experience, and sort of practice it, will my mind become more calm? Will my life flow more easily?
mm,
And so what we find is that yes, it's true. What it's doing is lightening the karmic load that you've got,
mm,
because each of us has a sort of karmic load from the whole that we didn't, ask for, so to speak. That we've It's all this conditioning that we have. from our family, from our genetics, from God knows where. And we've got to carry that load, even though it's not personal. It is our personal responsibility, so to speak.
Mhm.
It's our spiritual responsibility to lighten that load of karma. And when we don't have any sense or any orientation toward wisdom, then it's like we're just operating in the dark. So, for example, let's say someone is really ambitious, and the ambition is about, I'm trying to prove my worth, I'm trying to become enough. Um, if we hear that we can perform our actions but let go of attachment to the results,
Mm.
that you don't have to become anyone or anything, you just are part of this whole that's functioning together, and that if we understand anything, if we intuit anything about love, then we should have, our actions should be aligned somehow or express the love within us, the intelligence within us to make a contribution. Then what's that going to do to the ambitious kind of striving within us and the attachment and fear about becoming enough or getting my results, getting my $1 million? That's going to start to remove that orientation, and things are going to flow a lot better. So it's all of these values are introducing in some way the wisdom of non-duality to a mind that is structured in duality. And even if you just take one of those values and someone takes that on, like selfless service or something, living more selflessly. I don't mean just volunteering all the time,
Mhm.
but you take one of those values and that starts introducing that non-dual idea of unity into the person, into the mind.
So how would you describe non-duality? Excuse me. Okay.
Well, non-duality just means things aren't separate. There's no separate one.
Mhm.
So the core of this is the separate sense of self for each of us. That I believe I'm this certain mind-body object, starting with my name and everything that I'm associating with that. And I believe, there's this deep fixation of consciousness on that idea. It's an unconsciousness, and it's from there creating all the other divisions as we look out into the world. And we may intuit that reality is one whole, right? Like Nate, when we're in nature or when we fall in love or something. Oh, there's a way we can all intuit that it's one whole. This is oneness. And yet, from the point of view of the separate self, we just feel in our deepest place within. We just feel separate. We have a feeling of a deep fear, and also of a deep, it's an illusion of personal control. So that's duality to begin with, is this illusion of it's everything is sort of fixed and rigid and solid. And non-duality, I mean, it's become the code word, but there are many words for this that have been used. It's just that's the very technical word that
Mhm.
people have grabbed onto.
Mhm.
Unity or oneness or love or consciousness are all part of this.
Mhm.
And when we start to see, well, it's all one, right? Any teenager can say, "Oh, it's all one," but in what way is it one? And what non-duality points to is not just that, well, this material reality is one, as in, well, it's all the same atoms or something. We could say that's oneness, right? Oh, we're all just stuck in this like empty universe together, right? But
Mhm.
it's all one.
Mhm.
But so what? So non-duality doesn't tell us much about consciousness. This is a whole spiritual teaching. It's not just one word. So non-duality is really from the point of view of spirit or being, which is consciousness.
Mm,
It's not you're nothing, you're no there's no meaning, there's no, there's no God in all this. No.
mhm,
But it's spirit or consciousness is a divine intelligence that we are.
mhm. So do
And
you
we know, yeah.
so do you always feel that oneness? Like what if somebody cuts you off in a car or something?
Well, that's such a great question. Uh, because okay, oneness first of all is not a feeling,
Mm,
and so oneness is known even if someone cuts me off or does something obnoxious. I certainly register that, and I don't have intense, crazy reactions to those things anymore. I don't think I ever really did, but I reacted to many other things intensely.
yes, that was my next question. How do you react now to
Yeah.
difficult situations as opposed to before?
Right.
Mhm,
Okay, well, so I was saying oneness is not a feeling.
mhm,
It's just this recognition of how everything is happening. And it's really known through the absence of there being such a solid center here. That this sense of a separate me is like permeate. It's just penetrated and dissolved in awareness. Um, and so there's just not this sense of heaviness. And by temperament, I'm actually a pretty intense feeler and thinker and sensitive being. And yet there's a certain heaviness that is just gone. And so how do I react to difficulties? You know, a lot better than I ever used to. I mean, things come and especially as the years go by since I really got into freedom really, or peace. As the years go by, I'm seeing the reactions are more and more graceful or just, yeah, it's okay. Something that might have given me more of a shock or disturbance. Yeah, sometimes waves of disturbance might come. What am I going to do? Okay, that's an emergency, or this is confusing me. This life situation is a little confusing or challenging. But there's a sense of it's more of a disturbance coming through than a heavy like knot of suffering. And so there's for me the the deepest aspect of this is there's a stillness and a non-struggling, even in what appears to be, yeah, I'm thinking about that, or yeah, thinking is happening on this is something that needs to be attended to emotionally or externally in my life. There might be a lot of focus on something, on a task that's to be met or a life change that's coming about. And yet there's a kind of just a ground of stillness and just curiosity and compassion that's just working upon it. That's not sending the mind into such antics. There's not as much of a violence in that.
mhm,
So that's my experience.
mhm. So do you still like do what needs to be done? Like chop wood, carry water, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it gets done a lot more easily.
Mhm,
No, there's a lot less resistance to moving to the ordinary kind of task of life.
mhm,
Um, yeah, yeah, a lot gets done in that way.
mhm. Yeah, because sometimes people think, okay, to be enlightened, it's just to reject the world and, you know, um,
Yeah. Well, I keep hearing this, and I want to say this that people many personal life coaches and other maybe speakers who are sort of involved in spiritual or personal work, they'll often say, if enlightenment is repressing feelings and getting away and escaping them, I don't want it. I don't want that enlightenment. I want to be fully human and blah, blah, blah. Well, I understand the sentiment, but that's not what enlightenment is. And no one is saying enlightenment is that except like the absolute beginners. You,
Right.
you know, or and 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 I'm not saying they should know, but
Mhm.
it's just that's just not what it is anyway. Enlightenment is non-separation or love or intimacy. It's been said enlightenment is intimacy with all things.
Mhm.
So I don't let's not make that word bad and associate it with what is not even what it means. And then say, well, I want something else. I'm going to be fully human and I'm so authentic, you know, and yet I'm suffering. But yeah, it's
Mhm.
no, enlightenment just has nothing to do with any of that
Mhm.
repression. And enlightenment is the end of repression. You know, a lot of this is in psychology too, that they'll think, well, sometimes there's spiritual bypassing, there's a kind of escapism. That's absolutely true. We see that in spirituality.
Mhm.
You know, we see that in materialism too, don't we? It's total escapism.
Mhm.
So there's spiritual escapism, and then there's just your ordinary escapism that's running the whole world. So yes, there's spiritual escapism, but for if we're talking about the authentic spirituality, there's more of a facing of the deepest stuff than you could ever imagine. It's absolutely unavoidable because when you're opening in presence, you are facing the shadows. You're going to go into the hell that we all have within us, the human mind, the eons of human experience and life experience beyond humanity that's deep down in the psyche of every one of us. And you're going to go in and see, yeah, how your personal levels of that are and experience all of that. Oh, terrifying stuff. A lot more deeply than just if you, yeah, adopt a dualistic psychology.
Mhm. What about joy? What are your thoughts on that? Excuse me. It's
Um,
really bright in here, so I'm trying to.
sure,
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
a great question
Mm.
in
So
connection with that.
joy.
Oh, yeah, because it's this facing ourselves at that deepest level, facing what is, and the looking into the mind
Mhm.
and the hellishness that is in the mind that makes each of us feel, oh my God, I'm a monster. You know, I cannot believe this stuff is in my mind. I don't want anyone to see this and so forth. And but there's this looking into what terrifies us when we get the true meaning of non-duality. That I cannot separate from any of this. Yes, it's not me, it's not my identity, but it's mine to know, and it's mine to make conscious, and it's mine to transform. Then when we do this, what do we discover about all this darkness? Consciousness blasts it open and liberates it. And if you've gone through that death, the death of the idea of yourself as this little narrow, pathetic object that no human being is, none of us are this character that we think. It's like we've shrunken ourselves down into the smallest little stone.
Mhm.
And when you've gone through that death, it's not a death of a real person. It's just the death of that whole core structure. There's an incredible, well, rebirth, of course, and a recognition of the light of consciousness, this pure innocence and joy that I am. That's the joy we're talking about. It's not the joy of a moment of meditation and I'm going to try to be loving to everyone and I'm really going to try to see. No, it's not this hypnotizing the mind and wearing the right yoga clothes and robes. And I love all that stuff too. I mean, that's all nice, but that's not the joy. The joy is this pure, it's the joy of pure being.
Hmm.
It doesn't have, it's something deeper than just an emotional state. It's a rightness. It's an integrity of being. It comes from the integrity of our being, that that absolute love, unconditional love and joy, even in the face of great difficulty or darkness, which every one of us has to face. So that joy is something you have to earn. Each of us has to earn, and yes, it's already within us and we are worthy, but we have to earn that through facing our deepest fears.
Hmm. So that death that you talk about, I've heard other teachers speak about that. They went through a death first, not a physical one, but um, some sort of a death, of ego, of personality, or I'm not sure how to describe it, but there was definitely a death that went on prior to their awakening experience. So, do you think that's really important to go through that death first for self-realization?
Okay, that death is the self-realization. It's an aspect of the self-realization. Yeah, because it's a psychological death of this. What's happening is that as we're orienting to awareness and from starting to view life and ourselves from that place, then all the emotional energy that's usually going outward and the mental energy and the animation of the personality, the separate identity, all that energy starts to come back home. Now, what's that going to do? That's going to create a de-animation of the world, where the world stops looking as attractive, things start feeling blank, relationships start changing. I start to become bored with my own identity, my own ego personality, my own games. I don't know what to do in any given moment. I don't really have these ideas anymore of this is right, this is wrong, this is what I should be doing. You start to enter a sort of voidness or emptiness where it's just things are more gray. And but it looks like nothing's happening, but the energy is just coming back into consciousness and resting there. It's the projections, the projective energy is returning and relaxing, and that's going to weaken the mask and the projective habit of the mind. And what's going to happen as it gets weaker? The mask will crumble and fall apart. And so that is an inner, you're moving there inwardly through a threshold. It's the threshold of death or the void. Well, the void is used in different ways, but it's moving through a threshold there where there's no experience, there's no nothing, there's nothing to grab hold of anymore.
Hmm.
And I don't know myself. So that in that death is the that death is coinciding with the recognition of the watcher, the consciousness that is in which all this is happening, in which that consciousness seems to be, well, what is it? What's so special about it? I mean, how's it going to free me? But it is freeing you by if you put your attention on that as what you really are. It's taking your energy out, and you're going to find out how it frees you. Once the death happens, you will find out how beautiful is that rebirth or recognition of Well, on the other side of that death is, my God, I'm one with all of life. I'm one with the masculine. I'm one with the feminine. We were talking about the feminine. The
Mhm.
pure energy and joy and movement of love in life with the stillness and the presence and the pure um, witness that is always there as well. So that's that joining of masculine and feminine, Shiva and Shakti completely, and the yeah, God that is out of existence and God that is all of existence.
Mhm.
That is an incredible rebirth that, yes, even Western authors like Jung or Goethe talked about, Emerson, Thoreau, talking about this same thing. Many of these people read the Eastern wisdom too. So it's the same enlightenment, East or West. It's the same thing.
Mhm. Yeah, so how can people express that, express the Shiva and Shakti and the masculine and feminine aspects in their relationship so that they could be more harmonious?
Yeah, you were going to ask about relationships, I remember. Um,
Yes.
First, there has to be the orientation to that presence that is still, that's going to empty ourselves of all the ignorance and separation. And that's dying to the world, dying to the ignorance of the world, and finding the true world. Both men and women have to do that. They have to come to this, the consciousness and love within them. That's the ground. Through stillness, going to that depth.
Mhm.
Then from
Is that the
there,
true world? Is that what you're calling this the true world?
that's the true world. Yeah, consciousness is the world. And
Mm.
consciousness moves out of existence. Consciousness is just this pure stillness and presence and absolutely transcendent spirit. In the world, consciousness moves as love.
Mm.
And so in a relationship, once you have to have two people who are both oriented to that wisdom and love, that self-emptying, which creates wisdom, to know what's going on. Why is there an emotional problem between us? We have to be able to shine our light on that and say, where am I creating a separation? Where am I not one with my partner? And how then does love move between, yeah, the masculine and feminine, where he gives to her something that she has trouble reaching just on her own. He helps to unlock this immense power that she has as the feminine, the love that every woman has so intimate knowledge of beyond what men do. And she gives to him something that he has trouble to unlock in himself, which is the feminine in himself. I'm talking about masculine psychology,
Right.
generally speaking.
Right. Yeah, not gender based, just like
Yeah,
aspects. Yeah.
yeah. So she, by coming together in this love relation, um, in a conscious relation, which we can call it tantra, whatever. But that's then he starts to take something of her and find that in himself, this depth of love that they descend into together, and then there's not such a strong sense of separation between, yeah, the man holding his position and then the woman being frustrated with him, and then she has to be emotional, and then he can't stand that, so he's, attacking her with his reasoning.
Hmm.
No, no, that's not it. They become one. They're still masculine and feminine in polarity, but they're
Hmm.
not holding these separate positions. They're in union, and that's an experience we can all have in a conscious relationship.
Yeah. Interesting that you mentioned the word polarity because I don't know, what I'm seeing nowadays is this like parents wanting to raise their children to be gender neutral as possible.
Yeah,
Because they say, well, this patriarchal society, we need to have little boys play with dolls and we need women to be strong and go to war and Like
Yeah.
it's like you say like the sexes that like we're the same, we're equal.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, yes, there's an ignorance in that as well. Of course, yeah, I agree, but I
Mhm.
think there is there's a place for allowing getting more freedom for the male to experience the feminine qualities and the female to experience within herself the masculine aspect and to participate in the world. Absolutely, this is a positive development.
Mhm.
But then when we become dogmatic about this idea of neutrality or equality or sameness, that's totally different because the male psychology and female in the deepest in the spiritual place are very different.
Mhm.
Well, spiritually on the absolute level, it's the same source,
Mhm.
but on that depth psychology level, there's a very different expression.
Mhm.
And I think that's being talked about now that um, a free woman, of a feminist, a woman who's really empowered. She's at home in her femininity. She's she's bringing out the beauty and joy and love of the feminine that gives to the world that quality. She's not just powerful and, oh, well, we have a woman president, or it's not just that she can be president. Is it really a woman who's president? A woman who is bringing her femininity there and that's valued in our world? Or is it just that it's a woman
Mhm.
who has denied her femininity to live in an insane, pathologically masculine world? That's
Mhm.
totally different.
Mhm.
Because that is what we have now is a pathologically masculine world. It's totally out of touch with anything to do with the feminine values. I mean, it's been totally devalued,
Mhm.
and all of our dramas are about these men who are searching for that desperately,
Mhm.
and yet they're denying it constantly in themselves and in their female friends and lovers.
Yeah. So how do you think we have two questions for you. Two-part question. So how can okay, what do you think the masculine needs in terms of expression? Not a man or a woman, but the masculine expression. What do you think that needs to be at its best, and what do you think the feminine needs? And also, how can we be balanced in our masculine and feminine energies? How can people start to do that? Because we live in a pathologically insane masculine world.
Yeah, well, I did say pretty much how is this
Mhm.
orientation toward wisdom, toward consciousness, first of all, or God,
Mhm.
that we're taking our mind, whether it's masculine or feminine, we're taking our mind and orienting toward this need to awaken, to live in truth and love,
Mhm.
and to deepen. Now, that divine life begins when the false self is emptied. And if we're not emptying that deluded mind, that addicted mind, that jaded mind, then we're not getting the truth and love, whether man or woman. So the how is, well, there has to be a discovery of these teachings of wisdom teachings, that this
Mhm.
is the purpose of your love, of coming together. This is the purpose of our lives, number one. And it's the purpose of your love together, as man and woman coming together, is to deepen in this. So that's how.
Mhm.
Um, as we were saying, realizing the gifts of the masculine and the gifts of the feminine that we both need. I
Mhm.
may be a predominantly masculine expression
Mhm.
outwardly in the world, but I need the feminine is there within me. And
Mhm.
I need to know that.
Mhm.
And I think men need really to understand that they can have a less one-sided masculinity,
Mm,
and they're going to get a stronger masculinity when they really come to oneness with the feminine qualities.
mm,
And
mhm,
his partner, if he has one, is going to help him deepen in that. If they make love in the right way, if they if he approaches her in a intelligent way. And women, I don't think the main task really is to develop her masculine qualities. Yes, that's an aspect, but it's really to come to rest in the feminine because of the imbalance that we have now. That she has to come to this for herself.
yeah, that's why I belly dance.
What's that?
That's why I belly dance. No,
Yeah.
seriously, people ask me,
Yes.
and I've had men ask me, like, why do you're not even Middle Eastern, like, why do you belly dance? I said, because in an overly insane masculine world, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but I said, I feel like that's a part of me that I need to, like, protect and maintain and express because
Yeah.
I don't want it to be squashed. And that's how, and I'm naturally very feminine, so that's how it expressed itself to me through me, and I did not want to repress that, and I know a lot
Yeah.
of women do in order to be able to live in this world, and that's what I try to help women with, to just like
Yeah.
be comfortable in your feminine energy, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about the energy of Mary Magdalene coming now, you know, as it relates to, the divine feminine, and also bringing joy. So this is like a recurrent theme that I'm hearing from other teachers and healers, both men and women, who are
Hmm.
tapping into this energy.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems to be. Yeah. I don't know, I don't know about Mary Magdalene. I don't necessarily put it in those terms, but I'm happy for others to. But
Mhm.
I think this quality of, celebration and well, before we get to celebration, mercy, compassion, openness, receptivity. Receptivity is where it all begins.
Mm.
For that's going to do so much more for our our efforts to manifest things or create or those outward efforts to be receptive with that's where it comes from, like in the greatest warriors, or if you look at Star Wars, where the Jedi gets his power from his receptivity,
Mm.
and he receives, and then the lightsaber goes up. It's sort of, he becomes receptive. If you watch the originals, and then he's ready to work with the dark side of the force, but from a place of receptivity. That's where his power is coming from, true power. And so this stillness and receptivity is going to, um, it really works in our lives on so many things to deepen. Have you seen, for example, the books that are coming out? Like, I have a book about slow travel, and it's about taking it slow and appreciating quality. And then there's slow food.
Slow
Then there's
food,
another
yes,
book,
yeah.
slow sex,
I haven't heard
and
that one.
slow this and slow that. And it's all about that.
Mm.
We were talking about dissociation, slowing down, right? And think about the life, the movement of the world. Everything is movement and everything is sex. The manifest world is all sex, right? So think about slow sex, slow cooking, slow food, slow whatever, everything that we do when we come into the quality of presence. It feels like it's slower, but it's more rich. It's more intelligent. It's more ecstatic. we think, well, I'll just try to be really still, I'll try to be, and we try to meditate and have this kind of robotic attitude about what it means to be still. But when we become still, that's where the true ecstasy comes from. It's from the stillness comes the movement that is more divine.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I was talking about celebration. That's where the celebration is. It's not, well, just go and celebrate and go wild and that's the feminine thing. No, but it's from the receptivity, as you know, as a dancer,
Mhm.
receiving the music and being moved. And if we would come to our own, come to that death that brings life that we talked about, through stillness, through receptivity, die the right death that you may live now. Die now, not later. Die now so that you can live. And from that receptivity, you will come to all the gifts of the what we're calling the feminine and masculine. The best of those qualities will come out. And so we come into a life that is pure celebration. As one of the teachers of mine says, we have to learn to graduate from peace to celebration. So we tend to think of in the spiritual path often as peace. We're going to come to this static sense of peace where nothing moves me or nothing, But no, it's just by coming to the still point, then comes a true dance of life. This is really all that it is.
Mhm. And then the wisdom,
That
right?
is the wisdom.
Mhm.
Yeah. The wisdom and the joy are one.
Mhm. So you think
What do you think of that? I just gave a long response.
No, I think it's great. I was just feeling what you were saying. So, like being the receptivity you're talking about, I think that that is a way to gain wisdom by being receptive, you know?
Yeah, that is really the way.
Mhm.
Because consciousness is a receptive quality. It's just receiving everything.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah, because maybe sometimes people approach spirituality as something that they have to take,
Yeah.
like I'm meditating for my enlightenment, for my own personal growth, and so, there's still like maybe a lot of ego involved in that and not as much receptivity, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of again a kind of masculine or acquisitive energy.
Mhm.
And um and there's something to be said for effort or kind of focus and application. But there's also, yeah, but the grounding idea has to be receptivity, and it's not about going out and getting something. It's something prior to that. It's an
Mm.
attitude that is just different.
Mhm.
And I'm speaking with people now with spiritual guidance that I'm doing regularly around the world. And both men and women are talking to me about that they've been seeking and doing this, that, and the other, and what's going to work and what's the next step forward. And I almost always find that it's look, come more receptive, okay, and just acknowledge what you already know, what's already there. You need to orient a little deeper there, and then from there, you'll the right qualities for you to embrace will come about. Whether it's to celebrate more, to give to people. Some worry about the body. Am I going to get sick? What's going to happen? Give your body to life. It's a living sacrifice. The body is doing its best. It's going to live as long as it lives. But when we have this more devotional attitude and a more, yeah, receptive attitude, it's just, well, I'm just here to give and receive freely. That's this divine tantra of life. And give yourself over to it for God's sake. What are you going to do? There's no static enlightenment. That's not it. But from the emptiness comes fullness. From the stillness comes the dance. And you've got to realize both of those. The whether we call it the masculine or feminine, all of these words have limitations to them.
Mm-hmm. That's
But
true.
whatever we call it, that you got to realize all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Or I
So,
should say, all of those aspects will be realized if you
okay.
come to the right. Yeah, it will all reveal itself as one if we really take the deepest uh, orientation there.
Okay. All right. So then what if someone is experiencing, they have all that and, they're receptive, but they're still experiencing difficulties in their life or their relationship and they just, you know, can't seem to pull out of it. What would you say? What would you recommend for them?
Well, there's nothing wrong with difficulties, but if
Mm,
what you're seeming to describe is suffering, when they're really seen to be stuck in some pattern of suffering,
mm,
and the suffering, as I've said, comes from there may be a lot of insight the person has gained. They may have done a lot of work on self discovery, but they may need more precise guidance, personal guidance to discover the unity, the first through the emptiness of self. Everyone likes the unity and oneness idea, but you're not going to truly know that and discover the freedom from your difficulties unless you get the emptying of the false self. The way that you're holding separate and you believe you're in control or you're guilty and responsible in a way that you're not. There's a way that the mind is really terrified. And there needs to be a deeper surrender. So what do I recommend? Well, I recommend getting help from a spiritual teacher and a spiritual teaching,
mm,
and that you go straight for the goal, which is to see that you're never this separate self you're holding yourself as. That's the only way we're going to come to trust in life and know for sure that what happens is good and right. And if there are difficulties, yes, I can face them, and all the wisdom will handle those, and love will handle those. But I won't suffer in the same way. So
Wisdom
even
will handle those and love will handle those. I like
yeah,
that. Can you expound on that a little bit?
well, from the point of view of non-separation,
Mm,
there's not the same suffering of the difficulty. It's in things. What's happening is impersonal, and it's just happening, and there's a clarity about it. There's a clarity. This is what's happening. I'm still enough, I'm receptive enough to see that this is um, what's happening now, what's in my face, what has been created by my past, by karma, the karma of the universe, not just my karma.
mm.
But,
Interesting. So you think a personal experience that you're having could be just part of a universal karma?
well, it's all universal, really.
Mm,
Even the personal karma is coming. It's all part of. It's inseparable from
mm,
the whole. You can't say, well, this is just this karma, that's separate from that. It's all connected. So, what was I saying about that? So the clarity of seeing that, of seeing
yeah,
this is impersonal, you have to change your
impersonal, right?
wisdom is changing your deepest view of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then from love, love implies a surrender and well, an intimacy or a compassion with these things where you're not doing violence to yourself or another, whatever the situation is. You're not projecting this division anymore. That these people are the wrong ones. This person is evil. You're no longer projecting your own shadow. And so that's love. You're really just being humble with the whatever life is putting in your face could be something really challenging. Um, this is the only, like, wisdom is what works. And what I'm seeing a lot with people is that sometimes there's familiarity with certain spiritual ideas or paths or practices, but there's usually it takes, well, usually people have to suffer more or just have a certain intense inspiration to really put all their chips in on wisdom, on self realization. They don't, until they get to that point, they're kind of dabbling and they don't really know what's true or what's going to help. And so they're taking this and that. But we have to come to the point where we're really on the truth. Taking a spiritual teaching that is explicitly about liberation, that is explicitly that is explaining and addressing all these aspects that we've talked about, what these different aspects of the process are. And the fact that you hear a motivational speaker or even a certain spiritual teacher speak, that doesn't mean you're receiving a teaching or guidance. Some awakened people or very or let's just say very wise people will speak and they'll speak about these things, but they're not necessarily guiding anyone. They're just speaking. And people are absorbing slogans and sayings that sometimes they're very powerful, but that's not going to liberate you just to take on a few slogans. I mean, I hold the word teacher lightly because, yeah, there's no teacher who's separate from student or anything like that. But you have to take a teaching and get a teacher, find a guide who will help you cut through. Otherwise, you're just going to be collecting these sayings and not, oh, I heard that, but I don't really know what it means. And it goes on. And then you get cynical
Mm.
because you're still, it's been 30 years, it's been all this time, and you're still not free. And you say, well, is any of this true? I see that all the time.
Mhm. So did you have, who are your teachers or your guru? What was your experience?
Um, well, my first living teacher was Adyashanti, and he was local to me, so I attended his talks and read everything he's wrote and um, heard many of his talks and teachings that were recorded. Um, and he was very much a teacher. He was there saying, "This is a teaching of liberation. There's no one special up here, on the stage, but this is the process by which you know, we come to the teacher is an external circumstance appearing to us when we need."
Mm.
And he was a very beautiful expression.
Mhm.
Adya is.
When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah, yeah. He appeared to me. I'd heard about him, and he was radiating such clarity and love, both.
Mm.
Both that masculine sort of sharp, focused, penetrating wisdom aspect, and it doesn't just belong to men at all. And the love, he's an integrated being because consciousness brings that integration about. So him just saying these things and being that way, you know, unlocked the door for me to, yeah, recognize that in yourself, embrace that. And I just took in everything that he said, and that created, the real major shift of recognition right away. After Adya were several teachers who were important to me. Barry Long was one of them. He was an Australian teacher.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a very unique, uncompromising man, sometimes a bit grumpy, but
Mhm.
incredibly deep writer
Mhm.
and teacher and
Mhm.
mystic.
Yeah, I think wasn't he Eckhart Tolle's teacher?
He had been at one point, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. When Eckhart first awakened, he came to Barry, who explained to him what was happening. And
Mm.
Barry taught about man and woman and
Y-
tantric love and
Yes, yes, he did.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that teaching really was um, deepening and addressing some other aspects that maybe Adya and some hadn't as much. So he was a major figure,
Hmm.
major for me. Just some kind of deep resonance for me with Barry Long.
Hmm.
He's a very practical Western guy, and I have something in me is really similar to that.
Yeah, well, that's the function of this show, is to, you know, take the notion of spirituality as something out there or so esoteric and put it back into the practical.
Yeah,
That's why we ask
exactly.
practical questions like, okay, somebody's cutting you off. Do you still feel
Yeah,
oneness?
yeah, right,
How do
and
you deal with
right.
your relationship with your partner when they're grumpy or they're
Yeah,
whatever? So,
yeah. Yeah, we need teachers who, and different teachers have a different medicine to them. So they're bridging the language, they're clarifying what that means, and they're bringing a certain humor or a certain ferocity or something that is, yeah, making it down to earth, bringing it right into our intimate experience.
mm,
Other teachers for me were more Vedanta teachers.
mhm,
Um, James Schwartz is a American man who lives mainly in India, I believe. He's a teacher of Vedanta, incredible teacher. He really helped to remove and clarify some of my final, doubts and questions.
mhm,
Um, Not that I never have questions anymore from more experienced teachers. I do have. There are aspects that I'm still discovering of realization, as I said.
mhm,
But James helped me to really see through some of the more nagging doubts and quandaries I was having.
mhm,
Um, and that's a traditional teaching of Vedanta. It's a certain methodology. It's a
mhm,
little different than Buddhism. Also the lineage of Jean Klein with Francis Lucille.
mhm,
He's a Jean Klein was French. Francis Lucille, also born in France, now teaches in California.
mhm,
One of the best and clearest teachers
mhm,
of self-realization. So I really love his teaching, and it's
mhm,
given me a lot.
mhm.
Yeah,
Well, it sounds like you have like a varied experience, you know,
yeah,
and you could bring to your practice as a psychologist because you can probably relate to people, like you said, in different levels and maybe pull
yeah,
from different teachings,
yeah.
even if they're not aware of it, but
Oh yeah, yeah. Because it's all pointing to the same place. And I also should mention I met with in association with Adyashanti. Everyone knows his name, but
Mhm,
his wife Mukti has
mhm,
been my teacher for years. I was meeting with her personally because Adya doesn't meet personally with his students, as far as I know,
mhm,
anymore.
mhm,
So Mukti is also a teacher, and she was really instrumental in helping me to, yes, settle in and integrate over the years.
mhm.
She's yeah, another more widely known teacher now as well.
So you think having a teacher is really important, really vital,
We all
or
need
teachers?
Yeah, we all need guides. Yeah,
Mhm,
and it's not so much that whether you need one teacher or a few, but just that you're sincere, that you know you're you have these teachers or one teacher for a reason, that you really resonate with them. You really
mhm,
feel a trust and that your questions are being addressed, that you're being met in equality and friendship, and it's you're going to know that that's working for you when you meet a teacher like that. Yeah.
Mhm. So, speaking of practicality again, can you summarize
Yes.
the role of diet, exercise, lifestyle, and living space as it relates to spirituality?
Well, diet, all that.
Yeah.
um, this is a matter of taking care of the mind and body, how we relate to the physical world, and
Mhm.
that affects your mind state. So the mind is run by three energies. In the Sanskrit terminology, it was rajas, tamas, and sattva.
Mhm.
The These are the energies that run the universe, the manifest universe. So tamas was the dullness quality or heavy clouding aspect of energy, and then rajas is the active, aggressive, sometimes restless energy,
Mhm.
ambitious, and sattva is of course the harmonious, buoyant,
Mhm.
yoga energy, how you feel after you've had a great yoga class or you've danced or,
Mhm.
gone hiking in the mountains or something.
Mhm.
So you want to have a mind that is clear and calm and you can focus. You want the sattvic energy to be predominant.
Mhm.
And so when I don't have specific recommendations about diet and so forth, except to be wise and smart about it and learn what creates a lighter system. All our world is struggling with extremes. Extreme
Mhm.
eating, extreme this, extreme that. Everything's taken to an extreme.
Mhm.
So we were talking about slow food, slow sex, slow this, slow that.
Mhm.
And it's not just about being slow, it's being sensitive. How do my physical surroundings uplift me,
Mhm.
uplift my mind, remind me of the truth, celebrating love and joy and beauty versus not. If I live in clutter, if I live in certain habits, if I'm addicted to this, that, some kind of food or drug or constant activity, constant social activity, I'm going to be what? Distracted. And then from there I might say, well, give me the how do I get enlightened? How do I do this? And how well no, you're not because the ground isn't ready then when you're so distracted and you're not calm. You can't receive what's what's within you. So all of these physical aspects of the mind and taking care of the mind and body is part of yeah preparing your own ground, living in joy. It's all part of the process.
Yes, there's joy in celebrating again.
Yeah. And when you have enough love for yourself, you're doing these things naturally. It's not like, well, I'm doing this so I can be awakened,
Mhm.
eating the perfect diet. No, it's just, but when you have love for the self, myself, which is everyone's self with a capital S, you want to feel good. You want to do well by yourself and by others. You want to uplift and be uplifted. So you will
Mhm.
just naturally find yourself paying attention. What feels right for me today? What kind of exercise? What
Mhm.
kind of company?
Mhm.
It's all part of the same thing.
Mhm. Okay. Well, we've come to the end of our show.
Have we gone over?
Yeah, we've gone a little over, but it's
Yeah,
okay. So would you like to share anything else before we end? And also, how can people reach you for spiritual guidance or counseling
sure.
or any of that?
Um, my website is michaeldamian.org. That's
Mhm.
Damian, Damian.org. And people can contact me for sessions in person here in Woodside, Redwood City area, or by Skype or phone. And sessions are by donation according to ability or, yeah, inspiration. Um, Yeah, and
That's
I
great.
also
Do you
answer.
work with couples as well? What kind of
If it were a spiritual question, yeah, I would talk to a couple certainly.
hmm
But this is spiritual guidance. It just has to be a focus on, yeah, something that relates to that,
Okay.
rather than like a marital problem or
hmm
yeah. Um, so, and I also will answer questions by email and so forth. Yeah.
Okay.
And I will be holding more regular meetings now in Redwood City,
hmm
um, starting within a couple weeks. That'll be on my website, a regular group for self realization and deepening. I have given talks in this area and in Europe recently, but I'm setting up regular meetings here now.
hmm
So I think that will be helpful to.
Yeah, that would be great. Yes, let me know, and I can come and see you.
Yeah, that'd be great. It was really a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, you too. So Michael Damian, Damian
Yeah.
.org?
.org. Yeah.
.org. Okay. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Okay. You too. Take care.
Namaste.
Namaste.